call is now being recorded.
So, Anthony, I was doing a little trolling around on the internet about you, and Wikipedia had some interesting descriptions. You were called, your material was called a series of sociopathic non sequiturs, and you were described as being arrogant and villainous. And so far, you don't seem that way on the phone with me. So I'm just curious if you want to try and clear up any kind of misconceptions about, who you are and what your act is like, because sociopath doesn't quite seem to capture it to me. So,
well, I think it's a fair assessment. As a person, I'm a normal guy. I'm a good person in real life. I just think it's very funny to play the villain. In the same way that when you watch a movie, the villain is usually the most interesting character. And he's the kind of guy you want to see on the screen. He can be very funny. I always enjoyed that. And I liked as a kid, I liked watching wrestling. Professional wrestling, and the bad guy wrestlers were really funny to me because they would come out and just insult the crowd, and everyone would start booing them, and they would seem to love it. That I thought, if you could kind of do that comedically, it would be great. So I enjoy being this villain and a total sociopath with no moral center on stage, and I respect the crowd enough that they'll get it, that they wouldn't think I'm a bad person. Someone might see a movie and hate the villain in the movie, and then see the actor later on the street and get mad at the guy, but that person's an idiot for doing that. You should know this is entertainment, and I'm just pretending to be like this.
So it's just the character you play on stage is that a kind of a character, just that it's a version of you, but not really you, is what you're saying.
Exactly, and I think it's just very funny to be that way, but you shouldn't take it seriously. I mean, I'm a comedian. It's all one big joke. So I'm not actually being a jerk. I'm just acting like one.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm sure your mom is happy about that too. So
yeah, she enjoys hearing that. Yeah.
So, and now that you had your Caligula special and the album, is that material sort of retired? Do you ever put things away completely? Do you have certain staples that you pull out?
Absolutely.
Because,
as soon as I record the new hour, as soon as I record an hour, I'm immediately start replacing things. So if you saw me the day after I filmed Caligula, you would have seen maybe that same set with a couple new jokes put in there. And at this point, it's been a year and a half since I filmed that special. A year and a half or so. The hour is completely new. So if anyone who's coming to see me in Atlantic City will see nothing that was on Caligula, but it's been a slow process of taking things out. I always just like to have new material to keep myself interested and to keep the audience coming back so they know if they love the special, they're seeing all new stuff.
And so when you're trying to, once that special airs and all of a sudden it's like time to start over or do you always have material in your head that you can't wait to put in the act? Or is it kind of a little bit of a staring at the blank page kind of thing and trying to figure out okay, what's next? What do I do now?
It's a little of that. There's a little frustration to it because you just have this huge mountain to climb. You've been kind of piecing it together bit by bit, and I don't really have anything left in the gas tank at the end. I put everything into that hour to make it as good as it possibly can be on the day that I film it or the day I record it. So then the next day I start with a blank page. And it's frustrating because you have so much to do, but you have total freedom. I don't have to worry about, I already told a joke about this, I can't do that. I've got another blank slate to create from. So that's really fun, and it's exhilarating, even though it's tough and it's certainly a hard process.
And you kind of came into this from writing, right? That was you wrote for the Jimmy Fallons for late night and other kinds of writing. So were you already performing at that point too, or? I
was already performing. I started performing to become a writer. So I wanted to be a comedy writer and write jokes, and someone told me, well, if you want to do that, it's easier to start as a stand-up because then you can tell people your humor instead of trying to make them read it. And they were totally right, but because I was so dark and kind of offensive, I didn't get a writing job for a long, long time. And by the time I finally landed the Jimmy Fallon job, I had already done stand-up on TV a few times. I had recorded a half-hour special for Comedy Central. Stand-up was already well on its way. Whereas if I had gotten a writing job, by the time I finally got the writing job, I liked performing so much more because I had the freedom to do what I wanted. And I kind of had my niche persona that I enjoyed writing for more than I enjoyed writing for other people.
Yeah, I think I read that at least with Jimmy Fallon, like the process of having to like write these jokes, and then he just he got to decide. Obviously, it's his show, what he wanted or what he didn't want, and it was sort of maybe a little frustrating from you think you have a great joke, and then it's not going to ever be told, by him anyway.
Sure, it was frustrating, but I'm not a comedy writer. I'm a comedian who wrote comedy writers, and then there was like myself and Morgan Murphy, who were the two comedians on staff. And so Morgan and I wrote what we would want to say and just hoped Jimmy would like it. Where the other writers were like, oh, Jimmy likes this, let's do that. Jimmy sounds like this, let's sound like that. And I just don't have that in me. That's not how I get my best work. So that's just the way it works. So it was fine, but it was certainly frustrating.
Now, how was it to have your own show? I think you're just on for a couple seasons, right? That's off the air now. The
yes.
Offensive. And was that fun to do that show? What was that like? With you being sort of the headliner for it?
Sure, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and at times it got tiring. At times it got a little boring. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being the guy who got to say yes or no. It never occurred to me to have my own show until I was working for Jimmy Fallon, and we're sitting around that table, and I was like, oh, my dream is to be sitting at this table, throwing out jokes, pitching jokes, and I'm living my dream right now. And then I see Jimmy, who gets to say yes or no based on just his own opinion. I thought, oh no, that's what I want to do. That's great, because then you get to control everything. So it was fun to kind of get that chance, to get the opportunity to get to say yes and no.
And how was it to deal with the suits with the network people? Is that a little frustrating always to be the creative person and have them sort of want something, something seemingly arbitrary, or did they take a hands-off attitude at Comedy Central?
They were kind of hands off. It was frustrating because, and this was the one thing I really didn't like about the show, was that we filmed a new episode every week and then it would air a couple of days later. So you look at a show on Comedy Central like Key and Peele. Key and Peele get together, they write the whole season, they write a bunch of sketches. Comedy Central looks at those sketches and says, great, go with it. Then they film all those sketches, and then it just airs all in one big chunk, and they can't really get notes after a certain point. But with my show, it was like every week they were like revisiting the whole show, and no one really knew what we needed to change, but they knew the changes should come. So it was frustrating that no one could really give me specifics, but they were always watching. They were always giving notes, and I didn't really enjoy working that way. It was a frustrating experience, but it wasn't personal. I think it's just the way the TV business works. And coming from stand-up, you're spoiled because, in stand-up you're the writer, director, producer, and star, and no one's giving you any notes. The audience gives you notes every show. But as soon as you're the star of a TV show with like a giant ad campaign behind it, there's just a lot more fingers in the pie.
So are you working on anything else for TV right now, or really focusing more on your stand-up?
Just focusing on stand-up, and I might, return to TV at some point. I think if I did, it would be more of a narrative show, kind of like probably like a half-hour, single camera, basic cable or premium cable show where I would play like a version of myself, but more acting. That might come up at some point this year. But right now, I'm just really focusing on making this new hour as good as it can possibly be, and hopefully recording that in the fall, and then getting to work on the new one. And
do you know who you're going to record that for, or what network?
No, I don't. I don't know yet. There's different ways to do it now. I could go back to Comedy Central. I could go to Netflix, which has been very popular. There's HBO and Showtime are getting kind of back in the comedy game. I know the album will be on Comedy Central because I still owe them one more album on the deal, but I don't know where the hour will go. I'll have my pick, and I'll just kind of see who offers me the best deal. I want the most people to be able to see it, and right now that kind of means Netflix. But if somebody says, we're going to give you a huge ad campaign, or here's what we're going to do to guarantee people see your special, then I'm certainly open to new avenues. There's epics, there's all kinds of different ways you can do it, or you can just release it yourself online and never have it air on TV. And that's certainly a possibility that's becoming more and more real.
And what about we're talking about wanting to be a writer and getting performing material. What about writing a book and having people read your material? Is that a harder thing to sort of convert into something what you do into book form, do you think?
It's not that I don't know if it's hard to convert into book form. It's hard to just focus on that. After the show ended, and I kind of finished the tour, I had a couple months off last year, and I thought maybe I'll write a book now. But I think there's your comedian book that's kind of like about your life and these observations. That's a book that I'll write, down the road. Where right now I'd just rather be working on stand-up. Stand-up, I can write something and I can get up that night and perform it and get feedback. Whereas writing a book, you're just kind of sitting there slogging away, and it's not the time for me to do that yet. And I even thought about writing a novel and worked on that for a little bit and was just immediately hated it. Just thought, this is boring. I'd rather be writing jokes. Jokes are so much fun to do, and I enjoy that more right now. So maybe in a few years when I'm sick of the road, I'll sit down and bang out a couple books. But it's a goal I have. It's just not the right time.
Okay. And before we go, have you played Atlantic City before? You probably have, I would imagine, right?
Oh yeah, this is my fourth or fifth time at the Borgata. I think I've done that same theater every time I've come, and it's always been great. I remember the first time I ever performed there, I opened for someone, and I came out and did 20 minutes, and then they went out to do an hour, and the crowd I remember was screaming like, "Bring back Anthony," and I just thought that was the best compliment I could ever get. So I always have a great time in Atlantic City. I love that room, and that's the last show of the tour. So that'll be a good one to end on, and I'll be in a great mood.
So you you would think to stay there because the last show of the tour, just kind of wrapping things up for the time being, or?
Yeah, I mean, I take a month off and then I get back to it. So the hour's in pretty good shape right now. It'll be in better shape when I do Atlantic City, and then after that I can kind of get some distance from it, maybe try to add some more jokes, and then take it back on the road in the summer.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's everything on my list of questions. So thanks for calling today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
All right, Anthony, take it easy.
You too.
Bye-bye.